The town of Belleview lay nestled in a narrow valley, surrounded by dense forests and misty hills that gave it an air of eternal twilight. It was a place where rumors traveled faster than the wind, and secrets clung to the stone walls of its ancient buildings. The people were simple folk but wary, their eyes always alert for strangers or unexpected events. Life moved quietly here, following routines passed down for generations until the day Hodge arrived. Hodge's reputation preceded him. Some whispered that he was a man of extraordinary cunning, others that he carried a darkness within him that no light could pierce. He arrived on a damp autumn morning, when the mist clung to the streets like a shroud. His horse was tired, its flanks slick with rain, but Hodge himself appeared untouched by the weather. He dismounted with a calm precision that unnerved the few villagers who dared to watch. His coat, dark as midnight, fell perfectly over his broad shoulders, and his hat shadowed his sharp, calculating eyes. Bellevue's mayor, a portly man named Gregory, approached cautiously. He had heard of Hodge's exploits in neighboring towns, how he had taken control of small villages with astonishing speed, often leaving only whispers of his power behind. Gregory, though proud, felt an unsettling chill as Hodge's gaze swept over the town square, measuring each detail with silent scrutiny. "I am Hodge," the man announced, his voice low and smooth yet carrying a weight that commanded attention. "I have come to serve, to organize, and to guide Bellevue." The mayor's smile was thin. "We welcome you, I suppose. But Bellevue has its own ways. We don't take kindly to outsiders telling us how to live." Hodge's lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly. "That is why I am here. To improve what you believe is unchangeable, to reveal the truth beneath the calm." By sunset, Hodge had secured lodging in the largest inn of Bellevue. His presence stirred curiosity, and by nightfall whispers had spread through every corner of the town. Some said he was a savior, capable of leading Bellevue to prosperity. Others insisted he was a harbinger of doom, a shadow that would consume everything in its path. Inside the inn, Hodge studied a map of the valley, his fingers tracing the winding paths and hidden clearings with meticulous care. He had a plan, a vision that extended far beyond the narrow boundaries of the town. He knew the weaknesses of Bellevue, its reliance on tradition, its fear of change. These were the threads he intended to weave into his design. Meanwhile, in a quiet alleyway near the edge of town, a young boy named Thomas watched Hodge with wide, cautious eyes. Thomas had grown up listening to tales of outsiders who brought calamity, and yet there was something different about this man. Hodge moved with purpose, his shadow stretching unnaturally long across the cobblestones, as if the very darkness recognized him as one of its own. The night grew colder, and the inn's common room filled with the smell of wood smoke and simmering stew. Hodge sat at a corner table, quietly observing the villagers. He asked few questions, spoke even less, yet his presence shifted the energy of the room. Conversations faltered when he glanced toward a group of merchants. Children glanced nervously at his sharp features and the intensity of his gaze. Even the innkeeper, a stout woman named Mabel, felt a shiver run down her spine as she approached his table to take his order. By the second day, Hodge had begun establishing himself in the town council. He attended meetings with a patience that seemed almost unnatural, listening intently to complaints, proposals, and petty arguments. When he finally spoke, his words carried authority and clarity that left little room for opposition. Villagers who had doubted him began to reconsider, sensing that his strategies were not just clever, they were inexorably effective. But not everyone was swayed. A small group of townspeople, led by an older man named Elias, regarded Hodge with suspicion. Elias had seen outsiders arrive and leave with destruction in their wake, and he believed instinctively that Hodge's ambition would soon reveal itself in darker ways. He followed Hodge discreetly, noting where he went, who he spoke to, and the subtle manipulations that seemed to thread through every encounter. Hodge's influence grew rapidly. He reorganized trade routes, suggested improvements to the town's defenses, and even proposed a new system of law enforcement that, though efficient, carried undertones of strict control. The townspeople were divided. Some welcomed the change with open arms, hoping for prosperity, while others felt the creeping tension of a world they no longer fully understood. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in streaks of crimson and violet, Hodge walked alone through the forest bordering Bellevue. His footsteps were silent on the fallen leaves. There, in the dim light, he paused, listening to the whispers of the trees and the rustle of hidden creatures. He seemed almost part of the shadows, moving with a purpose that no ordinary man could match. Thomas, the boy, had followed him at a distance, curiosity overcoming caution. He watched as Hodge knelt beside an ancient oak, tracing a symbol into the soil with a careful finger. The boy couldn't see the meaning of the symbol, but he felt its weight, the unspoken power that emanated from it. Hodge stood, eyes scanning the horizon as though reading secrets invisible to all others. And for a moment, Thomas sensed that this man was not merely a visitor. He was a force that Bellevue would have to reckon with. As the night deepened, Hodge returned to the inn, leaving behind only the faintest trace of his passage. Inside, he sat once more at his corner table, candlelight flickering against the walls, illuminating the precise calm of his face. Outside, the town slept uneasily, unaware that the arrival of one man had already begun to alter their destiny, drawing threads of loyalty, fear, and ambition into a web that would soon envelop everyone. By the time the first week passed, Hodge had achieved what many considered impossible. He had earned a cautious respect from most, and planted seeds of unease in a few. Bellevue's calm exterior had begun to crack, revealing the hidden tensions, desires, and vulnerabilities that Hodge intended to manipulate. The town, once tranquil and predictable, was on the brink of transformation, and at the center of it all, Hodge remained a figure cloaked in shadow, a man whose intentions were as inscrutable as they were inexorable. The first chapter closed not with an event, but with the quiet understanding that something profound had begun. Bellevue's fate was no longer in its own hands. It belonged, in subtle and terrifying ways, to the newcomer who had arrived silently, yet would be impossible to ignore. The morning air in Bellevue carried a crisp chill, and the town was slowly waking under a pale sun. Hodge had already been awake for hours, moving through the quiet streets with a purposeful stride. The villagers, who had begun to whisper about his presence, watched him cautiously, unsure whether his intentions were noble or dark. Inside the inn, the murmur of conversation had shifted. Merchants and craftsmen discussed the rumors of Hodge's influence, but no one dared approach him directly. He moved to the corner table, pulling out a small worn notebook, the pages filled with meticulous sketches and notations. Each line seemed to hold a plan, a record of observations, a hidden agenda that only he understood. His eyes, sharp and calculating, flicked to the entrance whenever the door opened, noting faces, gestures, and the subtle hints of fear or curiosity that passed across them. By midday, he ventured out, walking toward the outskirts of the town where the forest began. The air was cooler here, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Hodge paused, listening to the faint rustle of leaves and distant bird calls. He had learned that Bellevue, though small, was a town built on secrets, hidden alliances, unspoken grudges, and the silent obedience of those too afraid to challenge the emerging power of his presence. Thomas, the boy from the previous day, had followed him again, moving silently behind the undergrowth. His heart pounded with a mix of fear and fascination. He had never encountered anyone like Hodge before, someone who seemed to command the attention of the world simply by walking through it. Thomas watched as Hodge stopped beneath an ancient oak, kneeling to trace a symbol into the moist soil. The lines glowed faintly, as if the earth itself recognized the authority in his movements. Hours passed as Hodge explored the forest paths, leaving behind subtle markers that only he could read. His mind worked like a machine, processing every sight, sound, and movement, turning them into strategies and predictions. Thomas, unable to contain his curiosity, stepped closer, and Hodge turned, fixing the boy with an intense gaze. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing," Hodge said softly, almost as if to himself. Yet instead of retreating, Thomas held his ground, captivated by the calm yet commanding presence of the man before him. Hodge studied him for a moment, weighing the boy's potential, then nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. The day waned, and Hodge returned to Bellevue as the shadows lengthened across the cobblestones. Villagers hurried indoors, whispering tales of the man who seemed to bend the town to his will without lifting a sword or raising a hand. Hodge entered the inn again, placing a small sealed parchment onto the counter of the innkeeper, who stared at it with a mixture of fear and respect. By nightfall, Bellevue had transformed under the subtle influence of Hodge's presence. Nothing had been overtly changed, yet the town pulsed with a new energy, a tension that promised disruption, revelation, or perhaps protection. Hodge settled into a shadowed corner of the inn, tracing lines on a map of the region, planning steps that only he could envision. Thomas watched from the doorway, understanding for the first time that he had stumbled into something far greater than himself, a world of power, secrets, and silent dominion. As the candlelight flickered, casting long shadows across the room, Hodge's eyes gleamed with quiet determination. Belleview was only the beginning. The seeds of influence had been sown, and the man who walked among them had already begun to shape the fate of the town, unseen, yet undeniable. By the time the villagers had gone to sleep, Thomas lingered near the inn's window, watching Hodge through the dim light. He knew deep down that his own life would never be the same. The whispers of secrets had begun, and Belleview would never forget the name of the man who walked silently through its streets. Hodge's arrival in Belleview had not gone unnoticed. Whispers followed him like shadows. His reputation, carefully cultivated in neighboring towns, preceded him. It was not only curiosity that drew attention, but fear. The Guild of Ravens, a clandestine network of smugglers, informants, and mercenaries, had taken interest in him, though he knew very little about them yet. Their emblem, a black raven with outstretched wings, was subtly displayed on lampposts, etched into wooden shutters, a quiet warning to outsiders. That evening, Hodge met with Thomas by the inn's back courtyard. The boy's youthful eyes brimmed with questions and cautious excitement. "Are they dangerous?" Thomas whispered, glancing at the shadowed corners where the townsfolk hurried past. Hodge did not answer immediately. Instead, he scanned the surroundings, noting the subtle movements of people who lingered too long near alleyways, who carried themselves with the precision of trained observers. "They are organized," he finally said, "and ruthless when provoked. But we will not provoke them, not yet." Hodge had learned early in life that knowledge was power, and information was currency more valuable than gold. The Guild of Ravens operated in the gray margins, where laws were suggestions and loyalty was a commodity. If he wanted to understand their purpose in Bellevue, he needed access to their world without stepping into the trap laid for the unwary. The following night, he ventured out under the cover of moonlight. His cloak, earth-toned and simple, allowed him to blend with shadows. He moved with the calculated grace of someone accustomed to danger. At the edge of the market square, he noticed a group of figures around a flickering brazier. Their gestures were deliberate, almost ceremonial, and the air vibrated with an unspoken tension. Hodge observed quietly, noting the intricate tattoos that marked each member, the glint of concealed daggers, the way their eyes flickered constantly to the surroundings. Thomas, hidden behind a stack of barrels, shivered. "What are they doing?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Hodge's eyes narrowed. "They are testing loyalty," he replied, his tone flat yet commanding. Notice the signals, the hand gestures, the exchange of sealed envelopes. This is how they identify friends from enemies. The night air thickened with suspense. Hodge calculated the risk of approaching, weighing every possibility. Then, a figure detached from the circle, a woman with a scar across her left cheek and hair pulled back into a tight braid, glanced in his direction. Their eyes met for a fleeting second, and Hodge understood. She was a scout, sent to gauge the outsider. Without fear, he straightened his posture and allowed the moonlight to illuminate his features, his sharp dark hair framing a face that spoke of intelligence and danger. The woman approached silently. "Hodge," she said, her voice a low, melodic warning. "You are far from home. The Ravens do not welcome strangers easily." "I am not here to be welcomed," he replied, voice calm yet edged with steel. "I am here to understand." For a moment she studied him, assessing his intentions and his potential threat. Then, with a subtle nod, she turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving a faint echo of leather boots against cobblestones. Hodge exhaled, recognizing the significance. The guild had taken notice, and in their world, notice was never neutral. Over the next several days, Hodge quietly observed Bellevue. The guild's influence was pervasive, merchants paying discreet tithes, guards looking the other way at certain exchanges, rumors spreading with alarming speed. Hodge began to map the network, identifying key players and weak points. Knowledge accumulated. Connections formed an invisible web. Thomas, ever loyal, assisted by delivering messages, retrieving items, and observing patterns. One night, Hodge returned to the inn and laid a crude map across the wooden table. "They operate like a shadow," he said, tracing lines with his finger. "But every shadow has an edge. Every network has a vulnerability, and every guild, no matter how secret, can be influenced." Thomas leaned in, eyes wide. "Do you think we can stop them?" Hodge's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "We do not stop them, Thomas. We become the force they cannot ignore. And when the time comes, we will strike, not with brute force, but with precision. That is how shadows fall." Outside, the night was quiet, but Hodge's mind was anything but. The Guild of Ravens had just acknowledged his presence. That acknowledgement was a challenge, an invitation, and a warning all at once. In the streets of Belleview, a new game had begun, one where knowledge, strategy, and patience were weapons deadlier than any sword, and Hodge, ever calculating, was prepared to play. The night in Belleview had a chill that crept into every alleyway, every shuttered window, and every shadowed corner. Hodge, now more aware than ever of the Guild of Ravens' extensive reach, had begun to understand the city not as a place of home or comfort, but as a living, breathing entity of danger and duplicity. The moonlight painted the cobblestones silver, yet even this clarity did little to reassure him. Every corner held the potential for ambush. Every sound might herald betrayal. Thomas, still shaken by the previous night's events, had begun to grasp the depth of the world he had stumbled into. He was young, naive, and prone to impulsive actions, yet Hodge saw in him a spark that could be molded, a latent resource that might serve their cause if nurtured correctly. "Stay close," Hodge instructed quietly, his voice a sharp whisper. "And do not let your fear betray you." Thomas nodded, though he could barely mask the tremor in his hands. Their first objective that night was subtle reconnaissance. Hodge had received word from the mysterious informant, a masked figure whose allegiance was yet uncertain, that the Guild of Ravens was planning something unprecedented, a heist that could destabilize the already fragile alliances between Bellevue's merchant houses. The thought of it made Hodge's pulse quicken, not out of fear, but from the strategic challenge it presented. He relished these moments when intellect and instinct combined into a dance of survival. As they moved through the alleyways, Hodge's eyes were constantly scanning, calculating. The subtle signs of the Guild's presence, an unusual marking on a door, a shadow flitting past a shuttered window, the faint scent of smoke where no hearth burned, were not overlooked. Hodge's senses were razor-sharp, honed by years of navigating treachery. Thomas, by contrast, often jumped at shadows, his nerves fraying with every whisper of wind or distant clatter of a barrel rolling across cobblestones. It was in one such alley that the first confrontation occurred. A female scout, unmistakably part of the Guild, emerged silently from the shadows. Her braid was tight, her scar visible under the moonlight, and her eyes were as sharp as Hodge's own. She had the air of someone who had seen too much too young, someone whose innocence had long since been bartered away for survival. Hodge recognized immediately that this was a test, a probe to gauge his intentions and his skill. "Who walks in the night?" she demanded, her voice low but cutting. There was no time for hesitation. Hodge stepped forward, letting the shadows conceal most of his figure, his calm confidence a stark contrast to Thomas's visible anxiety. "Observers," he replied evenly. "Nothing more." The scout studied him, her gaze piercing. For a moment the night held its breath. Then, with a subtle nod, she melted back into the darkness, leaving Hodge and Thomas to continue. The encounter was brief, but it reinforced the gravity of their situation. In Bellevue, every movement was watched, every step anticipated. Their reconnaissance led them to the merchant district, where the Guild had long established influence. Hodge noted the unusual patterns of guards' rotations and the strangely placed wagons near the warehouses. Every detail mattered. The Guild's network was intricate, and to anticipate their moves required not just intelligence but intuition. He and Thomas spent hours in the shadows, taking note of who entered and exited, the timing of lamps being lit, and the subtle shifts in body language that betrayed tension. By the time they returned to the safe house, exhaustion had begun to weigh heavily on Thomas. Hodge, however, was far from fatigued. His mind raced, replaying every encounter, every subtle clue, every fleeting shadow. There was a plan forming in the recesses of his mind, a strategy to not just survive the Guild's machinations, but to turn their own schemes against them. It was then that the betrayal became apparent. The informant who had guided Hodge into Bellevue's secrets had not been entirely honest. Evidence of a double cross, coded messages intercepted, a subtle misdirection in previous instructions, surfaced in Hodge's meticulous review of notes. The realization hit like a cold blade. They were not only being hunted by the Guild but also by those who pretended to aid them. Thomas noticed the change immediately. Hodge's calm demeanor had hardened into a steel-edged focus, his eyes calculating every possibility, every contingency. "We have been fed lies," Hodge said quietly, his voice betraying no anger, only precision. "We cannot trust anyone, not fully. Our survival now depends on our ability to anticipate betrayal before it strikes." The next days were a blur of careful maneuvers. Hodge established a network of small, loyal informants, each one tested rigorously before any trust was granted. Thomas learned quickly, adapting to the pace, learning to read intentions and lies with a developing eye that matched his mentor's scrutiny. They moved like shadows themselves, slipping through Belleview with an almost supernatural awareness, avoiding detection, setting subtle traps, and observing the guild's movements. It was during one of these observation periods that Hodge discovered the true ambition of the guild. Not mere theft or intimidation, but a calculated move to gain control over the merchant houses themselves. The heist was merely the first phase. This revelation was staggering in its implications. If unchecked, the guild could dominate Bellevue entirely, reshaping its power structure and leaving its citizens under an oppressive shadow of fear. Hodge's strategy began to crystallize. He would not confront the guild directly, not yet. Their strength was too great, their reach too extensive. Instead, he would use the information he had gathered, manipulate the guild into overextending themselves, and turn their own alliances into a liability. It was a dangerous game, a dance on the razor's edge of detection and deception. By the end of the chapter, Hodge and Thomas had positioned themselves as unseen observers, ready to strike at the precise moment when the guild's plans would falter. The city of Bellevue slept under the illusion of safety, unaware that two determined figures, one experienced and one growing into his own, were quietly orchestrating the first moves of a counterstrike that could change everything. Shadows of betrayal had descended on the city, and in those shadows Hodge thrived, a predator poised to turn deception into advantage. The night air carried the faint scent of smoke and the distant echo of footsteps, reminders that danger was omnipresent. Yet Hodge's resolve remained unshaken. He had learned, as all those who survived Bellevue must, that trust was rare, vigilance essential, and cunning the ultimate weapon. As he watched the city from a rooftop, Thomas at his side, the first flicker of dawn hinted at the coming storm. The game had begun, and Hodge intended to win. The following days weighed heavily on Hodge. The city seemed quieter, but beneath its peaceful veneer, tension simmered. Thomas had begun to grasp the subtlety of Hodge's methods, observing how he moved through crowded markets without drawing attention, how he spoke to merchants in hushed tones, always extracting information without raising suspicion. Hodge's mind was a constant whirlwind of strategy and caution, calculating every potential threat, every hidden angle. A message arrived through a discreet courier, sealed with the mark of a known ally in the city's administrative council. Hodge broke the seal and read swiftly, his eyes narrowing with focus. The note spoke of a hidden meeting involving influential figures, men who outwardly projected loyalty to the crown, but secretly plotted to consolidate power at the expense of the common folk. Hodge sensed the magnitude of the situation immediately. This was no petty theft or local scheming. This was a conspiracy that, if allowed to flourish, could destabilize the fragile balance of Bellevue. Thomas, still uneasy with the pace of events, whispered, "Hodge, this could be dangerous. What if we're discovered?" Hodge's eyes met Thomas's, steady and unwavering. "That's why we observe, Thomas. Knowledge is power, and here every shadow can be our shield." The two prepared meticulously. Hodge distributed tasks with precision, instructing Thomas to follow subtle paths through the city that would avoid attention and to memorize key figures they were likely to encounter. They gathered equipment, ropes, grappling hooks, and small tools that could open doors without leaving a trace. Their plan was not to confront the conspirators directly, but to gather undeniable evidence of their dealings. Hodge had always believed that revealing the truth, rather than engaging in risky violence, was the most effective weapon. Night fell, and the city transformed. Lanterns cast trembling pools of light on the cobblestones, and the narrow alleys echoed with the distant chatter of late-night vendors and the occasional clatter of a horse-drawn cart. Hodge and Thomas moved silently, blending with shadows. The meeting place was an abandoned warehouse near the docks, a place where secrecy was assured but danger was imminent. From a hidden vantage point, Hodge observed the assembly. Prominent merchants, council members, and even a few military officers gathered, speaking in low, urgent tones. Each figure exuded an aura of power and cunning, Yet Hodge could detect subtle signs of tension, furtive glances, tightened fists, and the occasional nod of reassurance between conspirators. He sketched the scene in his mind, committing every detail to memory. Thomas whispered, "They look dangerous." "They are," Hodge replied softly. "But they underestimate what we already know. Watch carefully." Hours passed as the meeting continued. Hodge's notes grew, mapping connections, recording suspicious behavior, and noting the circulation of letters and documents. Every coded phrase and careful gesture revealed layers of deceit and ambition. The more Hodge observed, the more he understood the depth of the conspiracy. It wasn't just about wealth or influence. It was about control, about manipulating the city's institutions for personal gain. Suddenly, a sharp cry echoed from the entrance. A lone guard had spotted a shadow moving near the alley, and the meeting momentarily paused. Hodge remained calm, pulling Thomas further into the shadows. The guard's suspicion was fleeting, and soon the meeting resumed, but the tension had doubled. Every sound now seemed amplified, every shadow a potential threat. Hodge realized that they had been seen from the corner of the guard's eye. He weighed the options carefully. Retreat meant losing the opportunity to gather the complete evidence. Pressing forward increased the risk of capture. With a nod to Thomas, Hodge decided to remain, trusting in careful observation and patience. They needed the full picture to expose the conspiracy beyond any doubt. The night deepened. Hodge's sharp eyes tracked movements and gestures with surgical precision. Letters exchanged between conspirators contained invisible marks, subtle clues that Hodge decoded silently. Every interaction, every whispered conversation was meticulously analyzed. Thomas struggled to keep up with the pace of his mentor's deductions, but found himself growing in understanding and skill with each passing hour. At one point, a figure approached the edge of the group, a man Hodge recognized from earlier investigations, a master manipulator who often acted as a broker between corrupt merchants and council members. Hodge observed as the man passed folded notes to others, his fingers barely brushing the paper, yet leaving a mark only a trained observer could notice. Hodge's pulse quickened, not from fear but from the thrill of uncovering a critical piece of the puzzle. As dawn approached, the meeting dispersed. The conspirators departed in small groups, carefully avoiding the main roads. Hodge and Thomas remained hidden, watching each figure disappear into the awakening city. The evidence they had gathered was substantial. Names, documents, subtle signs of communication, and enough detail to link the conspirators together convincingly. Thomas finally exhaled, a mix of relief and exhaustion evident in his voice. "We did it. We actually got it all." Hodge nodded, though his mind was already racing ahead. "This is only the beginning. With this evidence we can expose them, but we must do so carefully. The wrong move could ruin everything." They returned to the safe house, tired but vigilant. Hodge began cataloging the collected intelligence, creating an intricate map of the conspiracy. Thomas assisted as best he could, growing more confident in his understanding of Hodge's methods and the subtle art of strategy. Hours later, Hodge leaned back, surveying the maps and notes sprawled across the table. Bellevue's shadowed streets had revealed their secrets, and the city's hidden power struggles were laid bare before him. He allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, but knew better than to linger in complacency. The conspirators were cunning, and exposure would provoke a counterattack. Every move must be calculated, every reveal timed with precision. Thomas, now sitting beside him, spoke quietly. "Do you think we can stop them?" Hodge's gaze met Thomas's, intense and unwavering. "We don't just stop them, Thomas. We outsmart them. Every shadow, every whisper, every deception, they all play into our hands, and soon the city will see the truth." The first light of morning filtered through the safe house windows, illuminating the maps, notes, and coded letters. Belleview slept unaware of the web of corruption that had ensnared its leaders and the young apprentices who had risked everything to bring the truth to light. Hodge's eyes, sharp and calculating, reflected a mixture of determination and anticipation. The game was far from over, but tonight had proven one thing. Even the darkest conspiracies could not escape the scrutiny of those who dared to watch from the shadows. With renewed resolve, Hodge began planning the next steps. Thomas, though weary, felt a growing confidence. He had witnessed firsthand the subtle brilliance of his mentor, the way Hodge could turn observation into strategy, patience into power. The city, fraught with danger and deception, was a chessboard, and Hodge was always several moves ahead. The chapter closed on a city at the brink of revelation, with two figures in the shadows poised to change the course of Bellevue's history, one careful step at a time. The first light of dawn crept into Bellevue, softening the jagged edges of its towering spires and cobblestone streets. Hodge and Thomas sat quietly in their safe house, poring over the maps and coded letters they had painstakingly collected from the conspirators. Each piece of evidence seemed minor on its own, an overlooked scrap in the greater scheme of things, yet together they formed a pattern too dangerous to ignore. The city outside stirred with the routine bustle of merchants, cart drivers, and townsfolk, oblivious to the silent war unfolding in shadowed corners. Hodge traced a finger along the lines connecting locations on a weathered map. They meet here and here, but notice, every meeting has a clear escape route. They're careful but not meticulous. There's a flaw, Thomas. There always is. Thomas leaned in, brow furrowed. And you think we can exploit it? His voice betrayed both eagerness and apprehension. Hodge didn't answer immediately, his eyes scanning each mark as if the ink held secrets beyond the obvious. The room felt colder than the morning air outside, a reminder that the conspiracy was more than mere rumors. It was alive, moving, adapting. By mid-morning, they decided to follow one of the conspirators' couriers. The man was nondescript, blending seamlessly into the crowd. Hodge and Thomas tailed him through winding alleys, past crowded markets, and finally to a secluded courtyard where the scent of damp stone mixed with the faint aroma of wood smoke. Here the courier exchanged documents with a hooded figure who seemed unusually cautious, glancing around with a predator's vigilance. Hodge's sharp eyes caught the nuances, the slight tremor in the courier's hand, the subtle nods, the way the hooded figure's cloak shifted to reveal insignia too ornate for a mere merchant. "That's our mark," Hodge whispered. Thomas nodded, his own pulse quickening. They would not intervene here. The risk was too high. Observation first, understanding later. Every step, every gesture mattered in the silent game they played. Hours passed, and they returned to the safe house to analyze their findings. Hodge spread the letters on the table, aligning them with the map. The conspirators' meetings weren't random. They followed a sequence tied to the city's commerce, moving from one guild hall to another, always under the cover of routine business. Patterns emerged, revealing the orchestration of a scheme that threatened not just individuals, but the stability of Bellevue itself. Thomas's eyes darted across the documents. "Do you think the council knows?" he asked. The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Hodge shook his head. "If they do, they're either complicit or blind. Our job isn't to hope for oversight. It's to ensure the right outcome ourselves." Night fell again, but neither left the safe house. The streets outside grew silent, save for the occasional clatter of a cart or the distant howl of a stray dog. Hodge and Thomas rehearsed scenarios, anticipating every move, every potential betrayal. The conspiracy was no longer a distant threat. It was a tangible presence, stalking the city in calculated steps. Then came a breakthrough. One letter, initially dismissed as routine correspondence, contained a subtle cipher that revealed the location of the next clandestine meeting. It was a warehouse near the docks, abandoned on the surface but bustling with shadowed figures after nightfall. Hodge's eyes gleamed with the thrill of discovery, tempered by the gravity of what lay ahead. "This is it, Thomas. If we move carefully, we can catch them in the act." Thomas swallowed hard, a mix of excitement and fear. "And if we fail?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Hodge's expression hardened. "Failure isn't an option. Not now, not ever. They've already gone too far, and we can't let their reach expand any further." The following night they prepared meticulously. Cloaks, grappling hooks, and silent footwear were all packed and tested. Every precaution was taken to ensure stealth. As they moved through Bellevue's streets, the city seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with anticipation. Hodge's mind calculated each step, each shadow as they approached the docks. From the shadows they watched the conspirators gather, unaware of the eyes observing them. The dim lanterns revealed enough, figures huddled over crates exchanging papers and discussing plans with fervent gestures. Hodge signaled Thomas, who in turn readied the first step of their interception plan. The tension was palpable, every heartbeat echoing like a drum in the silent warehouse. But even in preparation, the unexpected lurked. A guard, previously unnoticed, began pacing the perimeter. Hodge froze, analyzing the threat. "We'll need a distraction," he whispered. Thomas nodded, silently drawing a small flare from his pack. A single controlled ignition sent a flare arcing into the night, illuminating the far corner of the docks. The guard's attention snapped away from the conspirators. giving Hodge and Thomas the window they needed to move closer. Every movement was calculated, silent, precise. As they closed in, they glimpsed the documents, the symbols, and the whispers that could topple lives. Hodge's eyes narrowed, determination hardening into resolve. The web had tightened, but so had their grip. Bellevue itself seemed to pulse around them, the city a living witness to the confrontation about to unfold. In that moment, amidst shadow and light, Hodge realized that the stakes were no longer just personal. They were the city's. Each secret uncovered, each coded message interpreted, was a step closer to exposing the truth, but also a step deeper into danger. One misstep could unravel everything, and yet the thrill of the hunt, the clarity of purpose surged through him. This was the path they had chosen, and there was no turning back. As dawn approached, painting the docks with pale gold, Hodge and Thomas retreated to plan the final moves. The warehouse, the conspirators, the city. All were pieces on a board too large for any one person to control, but for now they had the advantage. And in a game where shadows moved faster than the sun, advantage could mean survival, or doom. The web was tightening, and Hodge felt it in his bones. But so long as he and Thomas remained vigilant, there was hope. Bellevue's fate, fragile and tenuous, rested in their hands, and they would not fail. Bellevue awoke to another day cloaked in mist, the kind that seemed to settle not only on the cobblestones, but in the hearts of those who moved through its streets. Hodge and Thomas, still riding the adrenaline from their reconnaissance at the docks, convened in their dimly lit safe house. The warehouse operation had provided crucial insight into the conspiracy's scale, but it had also revealed cracks in their own strategy. They knew now that the conspirators were more connected than they had first assumed. Hodge traced a line across the map, stopping at a cluster of locations near the merchant district. They've embedded themselves into multiple guilds. Every guild hall is a node, every trusted member a potential agent. If one falls, the network adapts. They've been careful but not flawless, Thomas frowned, concern shadowing his usually eager eyes. It's like a spider's web, isn't it? And we're just ants caught in the middle. Hodge let out a dry chuckle. Then we must learn to walk the web without being trapped. Their plan was simple in theory: infiltrate, observe, intercept. But the simplicity was deceptive. Each move carried risks that multiplied exponentially with every new piece of information. They had to remain ghosts in plain sight, undetectable and yet present. By late afternoon, Hodge and Thomas split up to gather intelligence. Hodge shadowed a high-ranking guild official known to be sympathetic to the conspirators. Each step required precision, avoiding recognition, maintaining distance, and noting the subtle signs of surveillance. Meanwhile, Thomas mingled among merchants at the market, listening for whispers of discontent or unusual shipments. Hours later, they reconvened at the safe house, each carrying fragments of the puzzle. Thomas laid out a series of transactions that didn't match the ledger, payments made to unknown entities, goods shipped under false manifests. Hodge nodded, adding his observations of secret meetings, coded exchanges, and veiled threats. They're building influence, he said, not just within Bellevue, but across the river districts as well. If left unchecked, they could control the flow of commerce entirely, making the city vulnerable to blackmail and chaos. As night fell, a subtle tension hung in the air. Hodge and Thomas were no longer just hunters. They were targets. The conspirators were aware, sensing that someone was unraveling their carefully woven scheme. Every shadow could conceal an enemy, every stranger a spy, and betrayal was never far behind. Their fears were confirmed when a message arrived, slipped under the door in the dead of night. A single line written in charcoal on rough parchment. Trust no one. Even the closest may turn. Hodge's jaw tightened. He had anticipated resistance, perhaps even violence, but the personal threat stung with a particular sharpness. The next day, they prepared for a calculated strike. The location was an abandoned warehouse along the river, known for its labyrinthine corridors and hidden alcoves. Hodge's mind raced through possibilities, guards, traps, secret exits, but he also considered the human element. Desperation could make conspirators reckless, overconfident. They would exploit that. Inside the warehouse, dim lanterns flickered against damp stone walls. Figures moved with purpose, exchanging documents and whispered commands. Hodge and Thomas crept through shadows, every footstep measured. The sense of impending confrontation was electric. Suddenly, Hodge froze. A familiar figure emerged from the darkness, one of their own allies, someone they had trusted without question. The betrayal was immediate, the sense of violation cutting deeper than any physical threat. Thomas's hand found Hodge's arm. "We need to adapt," he murmured, understanding the gravity of the moment. Hodge nodded, recalibrating their plan. The Allies' actions had complicated matters, but they could still use the situation to their advantage. By feigning retreat and luring the conspirators into an exposed corridor, they could isolate key figures. Every decision now demanded split-second calculation. The confrontation was swift and precise. Hodge and Thomas moved as a single entity, disarming guards, securing documents, and neutralizing threats without unnecessary violence. Their betrayer attempted to flee but was intercepted. The consequences of treachery made painfully clear. The warehouse echoed with the shuffle of movement, the quiet hiss of restrained resistance, and the muted clamor of hurried negotiations. In the aftermath, Hodge examined the seized documents. Codes, maps, and detailed plans revealed the conspirators' intentions to manipulate trade, politics, and law enforcement. The scale of their reach was staggering, but so was the evidence now in Hodge's possession. Bellevue could still be saved, but the stakes were higher than ever. As dawn approached, Hodge and Thomas emerged from the warehouse, weary but resolute. The city's streets were empty, save for the occasional early riser, oblivious to the silent battle fought in the shadows. Hodge's eyes scanned the horizon. "We've won a battle," he said quietly, "but the war is far from over. And the closer we get to the heart of the conspiracy, the more dangerous it will become." Thomas placed a reassuring hand on Hodge's shoulder. "Then we stay vigilant, together." Hodge allowed himself a brief nod of agreement. Trust, he realized, was now the most precious and perilous commodity, and in Bellevue even the most familiar faces could conceal hidden daggers. They vanished into the morning fog, preparing for the next phase of their campaign. The web of conspiracy had been exposed, but its strands stretched wider than they had imagined. Shadows of betrayal lingered in every corner. Yet Hodge and Thomas pressed forward, knowing that only relentless pursuit could preserve the fragile balance of the city they had sworn to protect. The city of Bellevue, cloaked in dawn's pale light, seemed deceptively calm. Hodge and Thomas had spent days analyzing the documents seized from the warehouse. The conspirators' network was more intricate than anyone could have imagined, spanning merchants, law enforcement, and even members of the city council. Every decision made by the duo now carried weighty consequences, as even minor errors could ignite political and social chaos. Hodge spread the documents across a large oak table in their safe house. "This is the heart of it," he said, tapping a page marked with coded references to a central figure. An unknown mastermind orchestrating events from behind layers of intermediaries. Thomas leaned over, squinting at the cryptic notes. "Do we even know who they are?" he asked. Hodge shook his head. "Not yet, but the pattern suggests someone with influence, resources, and patience. Someone who thrives on subtlety." Their next move was critical. Bellevue's annual festival was approaching, a time when streets overflowed with citizens, merchants, and travelers. It would be the perfect opportunity for the conspirators to advance their agenda, but also the perfect time for Hodge and Thomas to expose them. Timing, discretion, and careful coordination would decide the outcome. Over the following days, they recruited a small circle of trusted allies, a courier familiar with secret routes, a skilled locksmith, and an informant embedded in the city guard. Each individual brought a unique skill that would allow them to infiltrate key locations, intercept communications, and identify the mastermind. On the night before the festival, Hodge and Thomas convened for a final review. Candles flickered, casting shadows on walls lined with maps and scribbled notes. "Remember," Hodge instructed, "every step matters. If the conspirators detect us too soon, everything collapses. We cannot fail, not now, not ever." Thomas nodded solemnly, his usually playful demeanor replaced with focus. The festival began under a sky of soft fireworks and festive banners. Bellevue's streets filled with crowds, their laughter and chatter masking the tension that Hodge and Thomas carried like invisible armor. They split into separate positions, moving fluidly among the throngs, their eyes constantly scanning for anomalies. It was in the merchant district that the first breakthrough occurred. Thomas intercepted a courier carrying a sealed envelope, a document clearly intended for the mastermind. He signaled Hodge, and they cornered the courier in a narrow alley, carefully extracting the envelope without alerting bystanders. Inside were detailed plans for manipulating trade and bribing city officials, each step meticulously charted. With the evidence in hand, Hodge and Thomas traced the network back to a grand estate on the outskirts of the city. heavily guarded and isolated. Every instinct screamed danger, yet they knew the risk was necessary. Their infiltration required patience, timing, and deception. They used secret passages discovered in old city blueprints, slipping past guards and wards with precision. Inside the estate, the mastermind revealed themselves, a figure whose calm demeanor belied the chaos they had orchestrated. Their identity shocked Hodge, someone previously trusted, a member of the council whose influence had been underestimated. The confrontation was tense, a battle of words and strategy rather than weapons. Hodge and Thomas presented the evidence, meticulously exposing the network of deceit. The mastermind's reaction was cold, measured, almost amused. "You believe you've won?" they asked, their voice echoing through the marble hall. Hodge's eyes narrowed. "We've exposed the network, dismantled the operations, and revealed the truth to the city. Belleview belongs to its people, not manipulators like you." The confrontation escalated when the mastermind attempted to flee, triggering a chain reaction among their loyalists. Hodge and Thomas acted swiftly, their training and coordination allowing them to contain the threat. Guards were disarmed, plots disrupted, and critical evidence secured. By dawn, the estate had been secured, and the conspirators neutralized or in custody. Bellevue slowly awakened to a city free from hidden manipulation. Hodge and Thomas, battered but resolute, surveyed the streets from a quiet vantage point. Citizens moved about unaware of the danger that had lurked beneath their feet, enjoying the festival without knowing how close they had come to disaster. Thomas broke the silence. "Do you think it's truly over?" Hodge looked out at the horizon, thoughtful. "For now," he said. "But vigilance is eternal. Every city has its shadows, and there will always be those who seek to exploit them. What matters is that we remain ready, together." The final days of the festival passed without incident. News of the conspiracy's exposure spread, earning gratitude and trust from the city's leaders and citizens alike. Hodge and Thomas had not only protected Bellevue, but they had also reinforced a simple truth. Knowledge, courage, and steadfastness could overcome even the most intricate webs of deceit. As the sun set over the city, Hodge and Thomas walked through the now bustling streets, their hearts lightened by the absence of danger, but still alert to the uncertainties of tomorrow. Bellevue had been tested, and it had endured. And for Hodge and Thomas, the journey, fraught with shadows, betrayal, and courage, had strengthened their bond and their resolve. In the quiet aftermath, the city breathed a little easier, the festival lights reflecting hope as much as celebration. Hodge and Thomas knew the world would always harbor conspiracies and betrayals, but they had proven that even the darkest plots could be illuminated by courage, strategy, and the unwavering commitment of those willing to stand against them. And so, Bellevue thrived once more, its streets alive with life, laughter, and the quiet, enduring vigilance of two figures who had walked the shadows and returned to the light.